Away.
It's Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, so you know what that means. It's time for another episode of Hashtag Event Icons. Presented by Endless Events. The show where you get to ask the icons of the events industry anything. So, you might be wondering, how do you get to ask questions? All you have to do is use the question panel on the right of GoToWebinar to submit your questions. Or you can hop on Twitter to submit your questions with the hashtag EventIcons. We'll be answering your questions live during the entire show. Before we get started, the more people we have watching, the better conversation we can have. So please help share hashtag EventIcons on Twitter and Facebook. Just tell your friends to watch at www.event-icons.com. Now, without any further delay, this is Hashtag Event Icons with your hosts, Will Curran of Endless Events, Laura Lopez of Social Tables, and Brandt Krueger of Event Technology Consulting.
But that's not all. We're also being joined by... That's not all. We're also being joined by the guy who's usually behind the scenes, Alex Plaxen. Alex, thanks for joining us today.
Hello.
Yay! Now, this is a special episode, right, Laura?
It is indeed. Thank you to everybody who is joining us for the live show. And if you're catching this recording after the fact, thanks for watching. So today's episode is what we like to call a potpourri episode. So it's a real mishmash of things. It's a little bit different than our normal Event Icons episodes. So we're not going to be doing, typical themed questions here. We got a couple of things that we want to tackle, things that have been on our mind, and we're each going to kind of go round robin and talk about them.
A little bit of news, a little bit of articles, and probably smells like lavender.
And that too. It smells really good.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I want to kick it off this episode with, are either of you guys attending any events on the horizon, or are you hosting any events, or have you recently attended an event that was notable, and what was cool about it? And I guess, Alex, since you're our esteemed guest here on this episode, maybe tell us about an event that you've been to, or that you're hosting, or going to.
So I'm actually going to the American Association of Justice annual conference in Boston this weekend. Just found out that I'm going up there to help out with a campaign for someone who's running on their board of directors. So that'll be interesting. That's not a field that I have attended an event before.
Me either.
A new industry. It's a bunch of lawyers, so that'll be interesting. I guess if anyone gets hurt, they'll know who to contact on site. But I'm going to that this weekend, and then in August, I'm actually going to ASAE's annual conference in Toronto and Connect Marketplace in New Orleans. So, got a busy
You were at WEC this year, right?
I was, yes.
Any major takeaways from that one?
Don't plan a keynote with 4 different speakers that starts at 7 p.m. the first night.
Wow, that must have been a long day.
It was a very long day.
Well, what time? Do you remember what time it started?
So that was the kickoff. That was the opening.
Oh, that was the kickoff.
Yeah.
Oh, that is interesting. That's actually an interesting strategy there.
It ran long. They had 4 different speakers, and each speaker ran long. And by the time it got to the last speaker, who was the one everyone wanted to hear, half the people had already left the room.
Was there an opening party? There's got to be an opening party. There was.
Immediately afterwards, which is where everyone went when they left the auditorium.
Ah, okay.
So everyone left early to go get food and drinks because they were exhausted. And for people, it was in Las Vegas, so for people on the East Coast, it was already midnight, and they hadn't eaten yet. And 7 o'clock, you're not going to eat dinner beforehand. So a lot of people hadn't eaten, but they learned their lesson, and they made a point to acknowledge it the next day, which was really great. Some events, when they make a mistake, they try not to acknowledge it. They don't want to bring attention to it, but they embraced it. They said, you know, look, we're trying new things. Some things aren't going to work. Some things will. And so I think everyone kind of appreciated that. But yeah, I mean, overall it was a great event. MPI always seems to do a good job. But yeah, that was kind of the big takeaway that I think everyone walked away with.
Interesting. Brandt, what about you? Are you attending anything on the horizon? Or have you been to anything lately that was amazing?
Well, the next one that's coming up is Connect Marketplace as well. So in August, I'll be there as well doing a couple different sessions. So I always look forward to that one. It's one I've done a few years now and enjoy. So I'll see you there, Alex. One thing that I wanted to bring up is just encouraging people to volunteer in their local cities and things like that when there are events going on. So this was the first year over the 4th of July. I actually kind of joined in on the volunteer organizations to help out with the 4th of July celebrations. So we kind of, as event folk, probably should be doing a little bit more of that, and getting involved in our local cities and our local things when when there's events going on, and lending our talents to that, because all in all it went great, but it's amateur people coming together and pulling something together as a community, and we could probably lend some advice here and there. Just little things like not having enough bathrooms and things that are kind of in the fundamentals of what it is that we do. So that's kind of my soapbox moment for the day. Probably won't be the last one. And just encouraging people that if you are, if we're, those of us that are in this industry should probably look to our own cities and suburbs to see what we can do to help out.
That's awesome. And then where can people look in order to even find some of those opportunities?
There was a lot of discussion on Facebook. We've been looking at it actually for a couple of years, and my wife and I were like, we should just volunteer this year. And I wound up working a beer tent, and it was a blast, and I saw people I knew from town, and people I didn't know, and I had a really good time, and and the town actually does a really good job, so it was encouraging and a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Well, I will share some events are on the horizon for me. Well, actually, I want to talk about an event that just recently happened. I also was in Toronto about two and a half weeks ago. It was one of the reasons I couldn't join the show, but I was in Toronto for High Tech, which is a hospitality IT conference. So we're talking the an IT professional who might manage all of the technology, the tech stack, if you will, for, it might be a Hilton, it might be Lowe's Hotels, it could be just any big hotel chain or even boutique hotels, and they converge at this one conference to learn about what is new in the industry. So, Social Tables was there, but I mean, we were also looking at, I kind of did a couple laps on the trade show floor, and there's, new technology as it relates to hotel door locks, and also the actual IT infrastructure. There's things that you won't even really think about when it comes to, if you're a planner, you're not really thinking about those things. So it was interesting to kind of see, what sorts of things, they're really looking for to innovate. So there's a lot of talk, which I know is typically a thorn in the side of a planner. There's a lot of talk about Wi-Fi and how can they provide, or what kind of technology products are out there that can provide the best coverage when it comes to internet at a hotel. So planners, if you're watching this and you have gripes with hotel Wi-Fi, hopefully those things will, you'll see some improvements at your events. But so that was a really interesting one. Very different. There were virtually no planners at that event. So it was a very interesting group, but that was in Toronto. Also, just props to the High Tech organizers for hosting in Toronto. I thought it was a great city. There's a lot to do. Everything was really close by. The weather was great. So that's one that I went to recently. So
Very nice.
Yeah. Yes.
Anything coming up?
Not really. There's an event here in DC. We have our own local startup week, so I'm actually going to be helping to host a meetup here. That's going to be in conjunction with Startup Week. But nobody really thinks of DC. I'm based in Washington D.C. as much of a startup town or a tech town, for that matter. So I'm excited to see the organizers really kind of pull those people out of the woodwork to really show that there's a lot of tech companies here, and hopefully, they get to hire new folks, and they get to make new partnerships. So I'm excited for that. That's coming up in September, so a little ways away. But all right. So I have a question here that I'm actually very excited to ask both of you, since you're both very you stay abreast of everything that's happening in the events industry. So my question to both of you is, what has made you go WTF lately as it relates to the events industry? What was it? And it could be something good or bad. And if you want to name names, you can do that. But if it's something, if it's something good, definitely give props. But is there anything in the events industry that caught you guys by surprise, or was something that kind of had you scratching your head?
Well, I mean, one of the interesting things that we talked about last time we had our little potpourri episode, is we talked about people were forecasting that there was going to be a slump in tourism and travel as a result of kind of the Trump policies, and we didn't. We intentionally tried to stay away from the policies and just look at the facts of what they were trying to, what they were anticipating. And I've read a couple of articles now that said that it actually hasn't happened so far, which is good. I mean, that's great. I mean, and that there so far hasn't been a slump, and if anything, there's been a little bit of an uptick. Now, some of the response to that has been that a lot of this travel was already probably booked. As we start to get, we're 6 months in now at this point. As we start to get past that 6-month zone, that's when we start to get into the area of, people are still booking things 6 months out to a year out. So it'll be interesting to see if how that trend continues as we move on, and whether or not kind of the confusion on policy and who we can allow in and who we can't allow in, which is still changing day by day, depending on court decisions and things like that, how that impacts the tourism transportation industry and tourism industry in general. So that has been something that's kind of interesting to as it relates to that.
To that point, I don't know if you saw in the news the female robotics team that was denied their visas to come showcase. And so what's interesting is, once it got news and people, there was a human story behind it and people felt bad, Trump stepped in and got them into the country. So it's interesting to see how certain cases slip through the cracks because of publicity and things like that versus, the common attendee who is not going to be a public interest story. Right.
So for high tech, when I went to Toronto, it required, this was a 3.5-day conference, and those required visas. It would be unfortunate if those people were not allowed in the country, and in the reverse, because they are going to an educational conference. But you bring up a good point that okay, so this got publicity. It was really unfortunate, and there was a human story behind it. But what is to happen to the other folks where maybe there's not such an incredible story behind it? So yeah, that's it. That's a good point. So one thing that kind of, it's not, a WTF moment, but it was more something that just kind of was way under my radar, or off my radar, was there's actually a local tech company here in DC called Invite. It's N-V-I-T-E. So you can probably guess they do event invites I knew a handful of people that worked there, but they got acquired by Eventbrite, and I had no idea. And so we'll talk about this in a little bit, but I was chatting with somebody just the other day about, I was on the Event Industry News podcast, and we were talking about technology and how some planners, they may feel like they're being buried by technology. But it's interesting to see the mergers, acquisitions, and people just, getting bought out, and also integrations within the event technology industry. So that was just kind of something that was like, oh, wow, I had no idea that happened. So interesting little tidbit there. Cool. All right. So
I just saw something.
Go ahead.
I saw something interesting. I was looking at Dreamforce is coming up. Salesforce is big, 171,000 attendee show is coming up in November, and so I've been looking at their stuff. They just launched their Road to Dreamforce, which is something they've been doing for 5 years. It was a live stream show, kind of like telling people what's going to happen, what's new at the show this year, what can you expect, how can you get ready. And so they've been doing this for 5 years, and a lot of people talk about live streaming and how prevalent it is and how much you need to get involved. In the past, every single show was live, and then it was archived and you can go back and watch it. They're changing it up this year. They're only doing 3 live shows. Every Tuesday they're going to release a pre-recorded episode. So they have it scheduled, the 3 live shows. The first one they did was live. But the pre-recorded segments that are being released every Tuesday are going to be much smaller. They're not going to be 15, 20 minutes long. They're going to be 2.5 minutes long. So I found that interesting that they're actually stepping back from the live streaming and not doing as much as they've done in the past. So I'm curious to see how that helps or hinders them with their marketing efforts.
Yeah, and actually that's a great point that you bring up, because I've always wondered personally, Social Tables hasn't really done a ton in the way of live streaming. We'll do like an event recap after, a keynote or a speaker has gone up on stage, but I'm wondering if people are now starting to figure out, we didn't see the ROI, so we actually need to remove resources, like, maybe it costs them $1,000, or actually Brandt would probably know the actual cost of renting the AV equipment and getting maybe working with your Wi-Fi provider. But maybe it was a situation that they could not prove the ROI of actually live streaming, and maybe there's a remote audience that does that does watch those reviews, but maybe they found that the sweet spot was 2.5 minutes, and so I too would be interested to know how that kind of all shakes out.
What's interesting about that is by keeping it to 2.5 minutes, you can post that entire video to Twitter and different social media platforms. So I'm curious to see if that had anything to do with the length of the times and the pre-recorded segments. Another thing to take into consideration is they do it in the studio. They have the studio set up. So I'm curious if the people that they're interviewing, like the second week, that the first pre-recorded one, they interviewed their chief quality officer, who's been with the company for now 9 months. When you pre-record it, you can record it on their time, even though you're releasing it every Tuesday at noon or whatever. When you have a ton of guests, we know this. When you have a ton of guests, coordinating that effort can be complicated. Whereas if they just have the host who is available and flexible, then the people they have on the show can do it when they're available.
Who knows? We'll have to see that shake out. Yeah. We have a question in from the audience from Anthony. Hey, Anthony, thank you so much for joining us. His question about events that we're attending is, no one's going to ILE Live in Calgary, Alberta. Are either of you going? Yeah,
when is it?
I sadly won't.
I don't even know what.
I don't know. Anthony, if you can hop in the chat and let us know when it is, maybe we'll clear our schedule. But yeah, I did not have a plan to go. I think it's coming up in August. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's at some point in August. But
And I just don't have a lot of interaction with Ilea. I know Will does. I'm pretty sure Will
yeah,
does. But
he's the current president. August 10th through 12th. Yes. Thank you, Anthony. Yeah, no, I will sadly not be able to go. So, but
between
here we go.
And Connect Marketplace, and I have a wedding.
Yeah.
I
have a wedding the week before, so and if you're interested, anybody who's joining us live, you can go to ilealive.com to sign up or get some more information. So thank you, Anthony. So, all right, moving on, and I sort of alluded to this a second ago, but this is more of a philosophical question about the events industry, particularly tech. So I just chatted about how Invite was acquired by Eventbrite. So I thought that acquisition was pretty cool. I mean, it's, they're local to DC, and Eventbrite is just this juggernaut of event technology. So my question is, how can planners feel like they're not being buried by technology? And I mean, there's an event app for everything, event app or software for everything these days. And for any planners who are watching today, how do you really manage the many, many pieces of event tech that are in your tech stack? And is there a right way or a wrong way, or have you seen anybody do it poorly, and what advice would you give them? So, Brandt, let's start with you this time. Any thoughts there?
It's going to be difficult to answer the question without sounding incredibly self-serving, because that's basically one of the niches that I try to fill with ETC is helping planners deal with all of the technology. So not only finding the right technology, finding it at a good price, audio, visual, and event technology, but then being there and on site and helping to manage it. So there's a perfect example. I had a client that she took one of my classes, and she's like, I'm capable of learning this stuff. I'm smart. I can learn this stuff. I just don't want to. I've got enough to do dealing with my bosses and sponsors and expo folks and things like that. I don't have time to deal with my PowerPoint doesn't work. So and I always use her as an example because that's exactly it. So I have been feeling a lot more and hearing from a lot more planners that they are a little overwhelmed and they are a little kind of done with the technology of like, can somebody just please make it go for me so that I can get back. I didn't get into this industry so that I can deal with PowerPoints and junk like that. I want to make it a nice experience for my attendees and focus on the things that I'm strong with. So I think there is a bit of a backlash right now, and I've seen some companies throttling back and saying, you know what, let's not do an app this year. Let's not do all the social media stuff that we've done. And let's bring it home. Bring it simple, and we're just going to use whiteboards and and especially internal meetings, and doing kind of a come back to nature, kind of thing, so that they just don't have to deal with it. Now, I don't think that's going to last forever because technology marches on. And this stuff's going to be part of our daily lives. So there's definitely that feeling out there, and I'm doing what I can to try and help with it.
Alex, what about you? Have you seen maybe a right way or a wrong way to deal with technology, and in your experience?
I think here's the problem. A lot of these tech companies and these solutions are complicated enough to the point where you need a customer success person to actually walk you through it and teach you how to do it. It's not intuitive technology yet. Some of it is, but a lot of it is not. So you end up working with, if you've got 10 different technology solutions, you're working with 10 different people. You can't keep it all together. So I honestly think the solution, and it's going to take time, is finding the things that are ready. There's a lot of new tech that's just maybe it's not ready to be utilized yet. Even event apps, finding the right apps that are tested and proven. This event that I'm attending this weekend, I was with my brother who's a lawyer who's attending, and he was going through the app trying to bookmark and add things to his agenda. He would bookmark it, and it wouldn't end up on his agenda. So what did he spend all afternoon doing? Going into his Outlook and going through the schedule and manually inputting every single thing he wanted to attend. That's a pain in the ass for the attendee. So it's about finding the technology. I don't know who produces that event app. I couldn't even find it in the app. But it's using the solutions that are tested and proven, and doing the right time. And maybe you wait a year until something's ready. But I think it's finding the stuff that works. I think that's part of the problem, and that's intuitive and easy to learn, and not adopting it all at once. If you start taking on all these brand new solutions all at the same time, there's no way that you could possibly learn it all.
And look for customer service too. I mean, that's a big part of it as well, is having that person on site that you can go. I'm having difficulty with the app and getting help, and being there to help people on site and to help you as the planner on the back end putting things together. There's an awful lot of startups out there that have this idea that they can just build software as a service and then step back and watch the money roll in. And you're not going to keep your clients if that's in, I mean, because no service is bulletproof. There's always going to be bugs. There's always going to be problems. And if you're not 100% backing it, when someone needs you, then they're never going to use you again. So, ask around and see who's got good customer service, who actually stands behind their product, and make sure that it's going to work for you.
That's true. Yeah, I would agree. And I would say another thing that planners can look for, or at least ask for, if they are looking to make a big jump into using SaaS software for their events, is really put that company's feet to the fire and ask them about integrations. Because sure, I mean, there's a lot of technology that's out there, and there's some that you really need to have, but how great would it be if those two pieces of technology talk to one another? So I think that if a planner's not asking about integrations, because that in and of itself is just going to lighten your load. So I mean, imagine doing work in one piece of software and then having to kind of duplicate it over here with this other piece of software. How great would it be if you didn't have to do that? So that adds another layer of convenience. And so I think that's kind of one way that planners can, I guess, ease feeling like they're being buried by technology. But I guess, Brandt, if anybody wants to take your class, do you have a link or that maybe we can add to the resources about event technology? You mentioned a course.
Yeah, so I do an online class on event production, technical event production at Event Leadership Institute. So eventleadershipinstitute.com, and that runs several times a year. They're actually looking to start increasing the frequency of that. So starting in August, they're going to run. It's a 5-week course, but you just do a couple hours a week. So it's online at home, and because event people are busy people and don't have time to do it. But you get a nice little digital certificate at the end if you want to take a quiz and get that. So absolutely, and yeah, we'll make sure that gets in the show notes as well. You kind of started the conversation there talking about a merger, and there's bonuses, pluses and minuses to these consolidation. That as we're seeing this consolidation, though, now you're starting to get all of these different little sub apps talking to each other under that umbrella. The problem then, you're going to wind up with 4 or 5 giant companies, and they don't share data then, at all with each other. So, a lot of the smaller companies are totally open to sharing their data, but as I do worry a little bit about consolidation, like I say, it'll be a double-edged sword of like those products will talk to each other nicely, but if you don't happen to like their one version of the hotel reservation section of their suite, and you want to use your own, now all of a sudden, yeah, you're duplicating data and things like that. So yeah, it's tricky. There's no good answer for that.
Right. And I also want to take this moment up for everybody who is joining us live. One of the beautiful things about Event Icons is that it is a show where you can ask the icons anything. So be sure to use the questions panel and the chat panel to ask us questions throughout today's session, and we'll tackle them as they come in. So awesome. All right. Event technology. Okay, so I have another philosophical question, and this is actually a good segue from Brandt and his course that he leads with the Events Leadership Institute. This is actually about events education. So my question is, how do we as an industry ensure that we're educating each other, and how will events educators like Brandt or like the educators at a university continue to monetize events education if the industry so desperately needs it? So really where I'm going with this question is that, and here's a little bit more context. So I meet tons of people in the events industry, and they're tenured, they've done some of the biggest events that we all know and participate in and attend, and I always ask them, how did you get to where you are? And oftentimes the question I get is, oh, I just fell into it. So to me, that just seems like such an incredible thing of, I'm sure you had to learn something to get to where you are today. So what I want to know is, how do we ensure that we are educating each other, and that, industry education doesn't become a competitive advantage, or does it? So I'm interested to hear both of your thoughts on that. And Brandt, since you are an events educator, what do you think?
I was hoping you'd go to Alex first so I had a chance to think about it.
Sorry. Okay.
That's all right. No, that's fine. I struggle with the education side because I do it. I do get paid for it, but behind that is 20 years of experience. And I want to find ways that we can encourage experienced folks in events and meetings to want to speak at our industry conferences and things like that. And and this is a conversation that's come up many times over the last few years, is one of the ways that we can do that is to actually pay our speakers, which our industry is really bad at. And I'm just going to be blunt about it. It's, that you're doing it for the exposure, you're doing it for all this kind of thing, and that's great, but other than just I want to give back to the industry, and I do several free events a year. That's kind of how I give back. I say I'm going to do X number of events this year that I don't charge for. But once those are kind of booked, I kind of have to pick and choose what I do and where I speak, and then I'm going to prioritize the ones where I actually get paid a little something. And it doesn't have to be a lot, even. It's just a little something to make sure that you're taken care of, and feel like you're part of the event, and your expenses are covered. And I've literally been paid less than what my expenses were, for an event, and and asked to like it. And so I think education is especially as we look to how do we keep our industry associations vibrant and have bring in everyone's asking, how do we bring in the millennials, it's education and it's networking. Those are the two reasons that industry associations exist. As you can tell, I'm kind of passionate on this topic. It's something that I feel very strongly about, that even if it's just a little something, we need to be paying our industry speakers, because otherwise the only reason you're there is to make a sales pitch. And all of these industries have, when you sign your contract, you were basically saying, I'm not going to make a sales pitch, I'm not going to make a sales pitch. Well, then why are you doing it? So if I'm not going to make a sales pitch, and I'm not allowed, and I can't be paid for it, then there's not a lot of incentive to a senior person who's working all the time in the industry to take time out of their day to go do something for free. Unless, again, it's kind of philanthropic, to do it, every now and then, because, you're trying to give us a little something back. So I think it's something we have to watch out for. And it came up, I think, in the last episode where we talked about the YouTubification of conferences, that, we're the YouTube generation where if we look something up and we don't like that video, click on the next one, and you can't do that live. You can't do that, to the person that's in the room. So how do we adjust that? How do we deal with that type of thing and not being able to click next? Okay, I babbled long enough. Alex.
I could go on and on about paying speakers.
Oh yes,
But
obviously I could too.
For you, Alex.
hot topic. No, actually, what I find interesting, and to your point, Brandt, is most of the speakers, if you go to an industry conference, are suppliers, or they're planners who are already industry leaders who get asked last minute, "Hey, we need someone on our panel. Can you please do it?" It's very rare that you get to actually learn from each other, and there's a lot of different formats that they're trying to do where you can learn from each other. I know MPI does one where they do, I think it's called a spectrogram or something, where they line everyone in the back of the room based on how comfortable you are with a certain topic, such as experience design or event technology or apps or what have you. You line up from like 1 to 10 along the wall, and anyone who's a 10, they then pick like the top 4 people, and then they become a panel for 20 minutes up on stage, and then they do it all again with the next topic. So you don't even know if you're going to be on that panel when you walk in the room, which is interesting. But I think that there has to be more learning from each other. If you notice, we very rarely hear from the people who are setting the best practices and doing the best in the industry. Like, it's very rare that you're going to hear from the event planner for an event like South by Southwest or Dreamforce or these huge events that are doing well, because they don't have an incentive to speak other than giving back to the industry. So I think, and to Brandt's point, I don't even know if paying them is necessarily the incentive either. They might not need the money either. So maybe it's connecting them to the right people. It's these industries say exposure, 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 but there's no guarantee that you're going to meet certain people. When I go to speak at a conference, it's not like they're setting up a reception where all the speakers are going to be in one room and we can talk to each other and get to know each other, or the big keynote or anything like that. They're not providing us with any unique experience other than us being on stage and hoping that someone comes up and talks to us after we speak. There's no guarantee. I don't know if they can guarantee anything or how that would look, but there's got to be something that can be done.
Well, I can say that in the over 5 years, so probably pushing 8 years now that I've been speaking at conferences and things like that, I have not gotten one piece of business from an event that I did for free. Not one. I mean, it's I don't know why that is. It's one of those. It could be correlation, not causation, that kind of thing. But but I have gotten leads and business from events that I got paid for. And I don't know why that is. And I don't, I would like to think I'm giving them both my best effort. So hopefully it's not because I sucked at the ones that I didn't get paid for. But that's just the fact of the matter. So this idea that you're getting massive exposure and getting all this business from something isn't an incentive for me. So because it just hasn't worked out that way in the past.
You bring up a good point there, or both of you do, is sort of the guarantees or the carrot that they're dangling in front of you in order to get you to play ball. And I think we're seeing this with event sponsorship as well, where I can't tell you how often I get an email in that says we would love Social Tables to sponsor this event. And truth be told, it's not like we have this huge budget of just money that is sitting dormant and I'm trying to figure out what to do with it. No, it's quite the opposite. And I think the same goes for you all in the way of how you manage your time and where you're looking for business. It's not like you're just sitting around hoping that business will just land in your lap. It's, the proven ways to get business for yourself, and your business. And so, I think that's kind of where the tides are turning, is that event organizers and planners are going to have to do a better job of that incentivizing of speakers and sponsorship. That is probably a whole other topic for a whole other episode. But yeah, I would have to agree with both of you that I think that in order to get the quality that we want, we're going to have to start paying our speakers. And so our CEO, Don Berger, just a little shout out to Don, he gets asked to speak all the time. And, there have been a couple situations where I say, well, what are we really, what does that do for us? And exposure is great. And it doesn't matter if you're trying to get exposure for the company or even your personal brand. You have to tie it back to something, that matters to you. And I would say, thought leadership, like, what does that even mean? How is that measured? So sometimes when people make that promise of, oh, you're going to be seen as a thought leader, it's like, am I? Or could I just do that on my own time? Who knows? But something to think about for the audience. And audience members, if you have any thoughts about speakers, have you ever not paid a speaker and had a good result, or have you paid a speaker and gotten an even better result? I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the chat. So here is my last philosophical question of today's episode. It has to do with the future of the industry. I do not consider myself a futurist, but this is something I've been hearing a lot in the events industry. Before I go further, got in a question or a comment. Cover their expenses or you are being rude. I would totally agree there. I would say that honestly, like, if you can't break even, like, if the speaker is paying to be there, that alone, I would have to reconsider even attending. So thank you for the comment. But all right, backpedaling here. So this question, a little bit of a futurist question here. So I've been hearing a lot about robots, you guys, robots in the events industry. So I want to know your thoughts on how will robots affect the future of events? Who will they be replacing and why? And I guess this time we'll start with you, Alex. Talk to me about robots.
So I think when you think of robots and you look at like the old movies that show what robots look like, it's not going to look like that. Mm-hmm. Number one. But what it's going to be, and what I think is really interesting, is the communication bots and being able to send a message asking a question and get an immediate response. That's already been designated as that's what the response would be for that type of question. So that's already popping up. You're going to see that at events probably sooner than later. You're not going to have an info desk anymore because you're going to have a feature in every app where you can just message this customer service concierge bot for the event, and you're going to get an answer, whether that's what room is the session in or who's the speaker for this session or what have you. They're going to be able to respond because they're going to have all that information already pre-programmed before the attendees arrive on site. So I think that's really exciting. I think it helps with our resources and our volunteers and things like that, because what they can do is they can really focus on the attendee experience and not just answering questions. They can really observe instead of just standing there waiting to get asked a question. I think it's going to be much more beneficial use of our resources. So I don't think those volunteer positions or those jobs on site are going to go away. I think they're going to evolve into something better, or I would hope. But I've already seen automatic registration where you walk up to a kiosk, you type in your stuff, or you scan a code, it prints out your badge, and you never interact with a person, and you just go pick up a lanyard off a tree where there's a ton of lanyards hanging, or in a box or whatever, and you're not seeing anyone person at the registration process on site. Of course, they have like 2 people off with the computer in case there's any issues, but you're not seeing the 10, 15 people lined up at computers waiting for people to walk up to them so that they can print their badge and stuff it. We should all be able to stuff our own badges.
We should.
So I think that's already pretty prevalent, and you're going to start seeing a lot more of that. Scanning your badge as you walk in a room for education, CEUs, things like that. I think you're not going to have someone standing at the door anymore. You're just going to be able to swipe or scan and tap your badge and see a little light go off, or tracking where it just tracks where you are at all times. But I think these kinds of things, if anything, they're getting rid of volunteer positions, not necessarily paid positions, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
All right. Brandt, what about you? Robots in events.
It's going to be a lot of what Alex said, but I think there's going to be those touch points that event planners will still look for. Like, where are the opportunities that it's important for us to have a person there? And I think about like a program like IMAX where they always have a bunch of people standing there with the dailies. That could easily just be a cart, full of dailies that just sits there, and anybody that walks by picks one up, right? But they've decided that they like to have real people with the things in the air. Welcome, have a great day. Here's your thing. It becomes then a choice. It becomes an option. Is it something that we want to be, kind of frugal, and our attendees just want to grab their badge and go, or do they like being, hey, welcome to the show. It's great to see you. What's your name? That kind of thing. Or is it, where you have a little bit of both, where those who don't like dealing with people are able to do. And I think that's more likely what it's going to be is, much like ATMs, there's things that you're going to be like, okay, I really am fine using this, bot to check in for my event or check into my hotel. But then there's other times when you're really going to want a person. And I think that's going to go with a lot of service industry jobs, including catering, where there's going to be times where you want a bot, either for the kitsch factor of going down the middle of the room with a, plate of, stuff, or, you want real live people because it's a fancy event, and that just feels fancier to have, people in tuxedos serving you stuff. So I think there's going to be losses of jobs in all industries, and any industry that thinks that there isn't is lying to itself. So there will be in hospitality and events as well. It's just a question of, it won't be all of it. It's just what is and what isn't.
I agree. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I think there's still, as Brandt mentioned, there's still a place for the human touch. So I think as bots take some jobs, new jobs are going to pop up because it's desired. You're going to have greeters and people whose job it is to, make sure that the attendees are having a good time. So I think that you're going to see more strategic roles pop up, and as Brandt said, you're going to have choices to make about how you want to improve the attendee experience. And is a bot one way of doing it? In some situations, yes.
Yeah, I agree. I think that just on the note of how there will be a loss of jobs. I mean, you're right. I think every industry will see that. But I think what that will really turn into, which we should get excited about, is the unskilled labor will be outsourced, hopefully by a robot. And then we can take that person and train them to do maybe the more skilled labor that is involved with the events industry. And then, how much more interesting will events become if we have you know, if we can kind of do the impossible, which was never possible before because we didn't have the people to do it. So I will be very interested to see how robots really, you know, come onto the scene of events, physically and philosophically speaking. So one thing to kind of stay tuned with. Now, you know, we're getting to the top of the hour here on Event Icons, and we like to wrap it up with two questions every episode. First one is, if you could only pick one, do either of you have one tip you would share with event planners? And what would it be? And Alex, if you want to go first. It's 1 to 2. It's 50-50, you guys.
You know, it's sad because I didn't think that I still have to give this tip. But I just found out, you know, I've been managing this campaign for my dad who's running for this position at this conference, and I said, you know, we want to do some stuff on social media. I couldn't find the hashtag on the website. Can you email the event organizer and find out what the hashtag is? It's 2017, guys. This event doesn't have a hashtag. Come on! Come on!
Hashtag.
Have an event hashtag, or your attendees are going to make one for you. And then you're not going to be able to track that data. There's extremely valuable data in social media, and seeing what the pulse of your event is online. And the way that you have access to that is through hashtags and tracking that conversation and those discussions and those posts. And if you have your attendees creating the hashtags, you're going to have, you know, this conference is AAJ, so you're going to have hashtag AAJ, hashtag AAJCon, hashtag AAJ Annual, hashtag AAJ17. And then you're going to have to go back when you're ready to go look at that data, and you're going to have to go find every single hashtag that someone may have used at your event. Make it for the attendees and make it easy. Come on.
Brandt, what about you? What tips do you have for planners if you could only pick one?
Well, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to go 1.5. So it's just, I just want to spin off something that about Alex was talking about social media, and it popped into my head. That this is one that in retrospect seems kind of obvious, but I learned recently is on Facebook, you know, frequently we've got an event or something like that where we say, hey, like our page, you know, like our company on Facebook. And people do that, and great, that means they'll get fed into their feeds a little bit. But the problem is everybody's following so many things, has 3,000 friends, great chance they're never going to see anything that you ever post, right? So what I discovered was just recommending to people not only to like the page, but then you can go in and click on a little triangle twirl down and say, put on the top of my feed, so that you make sure to see those updates first. So the way that I discovered is that we're having a lot of construction in our city right now, and nobody's seeing any of the stuff that the city's putting out on Facebook regarding closures and things like that. And so I just posted, hey, just hit the twirl down, say, put it at the top of my feed. Now, anytime the city posts an update, I see it. I'm guaranteed to see it. So as long as you're not hitting them with stuff, you know, all the time, so that it's like ridiculous amount of things on their feed, you know, then it's a good idea to go down that road. And then the second one is that the 1.5, not the second one. So because that was the 0.5 was just playing off what Alex said. The one that I always use. From technology, because we talked a lot about technology today, is just that I would always, and most people would rather see old technology used well than new technology used just because it's new. I've been saying that for a long time, and I really believe it's true, is don't get sucked into the hype, don't get sucked into the shiny, unless it's your job to do so. Unless you're truly one of those events that has to be on the bleeding edge. You know, we have to have VR at our event because we always have to have the latest thing at our event. You know, use the technology that's going to best fit your event. Use the technology that's going to be the most benefit for your attendees, even if it's not the newest, shiniest thing. I've seen fantastic speakers giving presentations using only a whiteboard. You don't need to have a presentation all the time. So that's my one tip.
Awesome. And then to piggyback off that, the tip that I have is that, and I might have used this tip before in a previous episode, but I will say it again. If there is a piece of free technology that even if it's making you be 10% more efficient in your everyday, I mean, you might as well use it. As sort of like, undercover events technology that I always throw out there is Google Docs or Google Drive. I think it's crazy that people are still downloading a Word document and then having to send it over. Like, you should just use Word, Google Docs for that. And so that just kind of blows my mind. So I would say if there's something free and it's making you be even just a hair efficient, just use it or test it out. I mean, I think Brandt is correct in saying, don't try something just because it's new and everybody's telling you to do it. But if it makes you that much more efficient, go for it. The second tip that I would give planners is that if very often I will see, and I've actually experienced this firsthand, the event surveys that come after an event. It's usually 1 to 2 questions, maybe 3. They're very, very short. Something that's frustrating of the events that I put on is that nobody takes the survey. But if you do get people who take the survey, please take those results seriously. Reach out if you want to get more information and really do a deep dive. If somebody actually took the time to fill out the feedback form of your event, they had something that they wanted to say. So I would say, reach back out, be a little bit more proactive. And then figure out a way to improve your event, next year. So that would be my one tip to planners is just really use that survey feedback. So, and our last question is, and we're actually about to wrap up here, is do you have any new websites, blogs, books, anything you guys have been reading lately, or maybe new apps or anything like that?
I have something.
All right.
Yeah.
This is going to come out of left field.
Ooh.
I posted it to Facebook, so Brandt may have already seen it. Laura, you may have already seen it. The new Thong Song. This girl has remixed the Thong Song. And I saw it yesterday, and I read the article because what they said is it's better than ever. So I was like, well, I got to watch the video now and listen to this song now. And the truth is, it's better than ever. It is a better version of the Thong Song. And yes, it's just a remix, and but they re-recorded it. It's not the original track. It's some new music, some old stuff. But he worked with some DJ or some group and remixed it, and it's now on iTunes, and they have a new music video and everything. And what's interesting about it, and what I think we can learn from it, is this is a song that came out in 2000. It was a hit back then. It's still kind of like a, haha, it's the Thong Song, haha, that's fun to listen to again. But just because something is old doesn't mean you have to completely get rid of it and try something new. You can take things that are old and are working and make them new by remixing them just a little bit and making them a little bit better. You can go back into your archive, see what worked in your event, 10 years ago, see what was really effective, and be like, hey, maybe we should bring that back. And there might be some new technology or something that you can use now to make it even better. And no one was asking for a new Thong Song.
I know I wasn't.
For this. Surprise attendees with something familiar but new. I think it can go a long way. And nostalgia and FOMO and all that, there's power to doing stuff with that. And so go watch the music video or listen to the new Thong Song, and hopefully you can be a little inspired to take something old and make it new again. That's my resource. Thong Song.
That's deep, man. I like it.
I know.
It started with Thong Song, but it actually wound up very deep.
I was a little skeptical at first. Little skeptical. Brandt, any resources, anything,
Yeah, I'm gonna
websites,
go.
blogs?
So I got a new phone, and I came as close as I've ever come to jumping ship and going over to the Apple world, but I just couldn't quite do it. And anybody that knows me, I've been an Android person for a very, very, very long time. So I actually got the new Samsung Galaxy S8, and it is a very nice slab of glass. I've been very, very happy with it. I had a Samsung a while ago, and I hated that thing by the time I was done with it. But I have been most of the things that I don't like about Samsung's kind of TouchWiz that they sprinkle over the top of Android, they've fixed. So if you haven't used Samsung in quite some time and you're looking for a new phone, it's definitely worth considering, and it is a really, really nice phone. I've been very, very happy with it. So I'm going to use that as my kind of resource of the week. If you haven't looked at, what's that?
Is that the one that blew up?
No, it is not the one that blew up. So it is the Samsung Galaxy S8. They make a big version and a little version. That's the other thing that I discovered is I went to the bigger and bigger and bigger phones, and now I've come back. So I actually got the smaller of the two, and I'm happy that I did. It's fully one-handable, which I think the dividing line is whether or not you have a tablet. So I have an iPad. I use it all the time for airplanes and things like that. So if you have a tablet, you don't need a giant phone. Is kind of where I think that winds up doing. But if you don't have a tablet, then yeah, it's great to have a great big phone that you can watch videos and stuff on. But I never used my phone for watching video, like extended, more than just like a YouTube clip or something like that. So I've been very happy with just the smaller one. Battery life's been fantastic, and I really enjoy it.
Awesome. My one resource, it's probably a resource that you're already using. So Facebook pages. So for any of you planners who, maybe your business or a client that you're working with has a Facebook page, this was an update to Facebook pages that I actually wasn't aware about. So if you dig into Insights, which is the analytics side, it's a little tab on your page. There's something that they've added with if you do anything on the paid side, there's a couple of new metrics for ads, and one is landing page views. So say, for example, you're a planner and you're putting some paid ad dollars behind, maybe driving some viewership towards your landing page to sign up for your event. You can actually see how many views you got. And then also something that's a little bit more interesting is you can get pre-impressions activity, like a breakdown of that. So what that means for you in layman's terms, because I was like, wait, pre-impressions, what? Is that this actually tells you a little bit more about whether visitors have been to your site previously. So you can measure that against how much new traffic you're driving towards those towards that sign up, and whether or not you need to maybe push more ad dollars to that landing page or not. But I think those are kind of two metrics there on the paid side of Facebook that I think planners should take a look at if you're doing anything with paid advertising. So, all right, top of the hour, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. If you want to see the recording or any of the resources that we talked about today, it will be in the recap blog post, which goes live every Tuesday. So be sure to check that out. And if you have any other resources that you want to share with us, share them on Twitter. We're at Event Icons. You can also use hashtag Event Icons. And we do this show every single Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, so I hope you can join us next week, where we'll be interviewing a new set of event icons. So we will see you all next week.
Thank you for joining us for another amazing episode of Hashtag Event Icons. To catch the transcription and all of the resources mentioned, head to www.helloendless.com/blog. This week's episode will be posted and available by next Tuesday. Also, let us know what you thought about this week's episode. Share your biggest takeaway and join the Twitter conversation sponsored by Alex Plaxen and Little Bird Told Media. Just tag your post with hashtag Event Icons. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on Hashtag Event Icons.